We are live.
That's so funny. Hi. Oh my gosh.
Popped up.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as I walked out, right?
I'm going live with an empty chair.
Yeah, exactly, right? Welcome to Harmony TV. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you, Kristen, so much. As always, I love having you by my side as my support, as my everything assistant, everything. So welcome, everybody. I am so happy to be here. It's been several weeks, and the intention with this Harmony TV, with this, program, situation, TV show, internet TV show, is to have a weekly conversation. And there's a reason why we haven't been around for the past 2 weeks. We took a little 2-week hiatus. So if those of you who aren't following me on social media haven't heard about this, I haven't actually sent anything out to my email list yet, but my mom has had some very serious health complications in the past couple of weeks. And I've actually moved from Austin in with her and been caring for her and helping her navigate the sick care system, which is what I'm now calling it. It is a system of pill and pain management, especially the older you get. So all these things are always happening for us, right? Like, I don't believe that this is a good thing, but I do believe it's something to realize the lessons, realize what I'm meant to learn and what I'm meant to take away from this. And I think the beauty is it just gives me so much more information, not only to help women and help in the pursuit of women's health, to up-level women's health in this current climate, but also to really kind of shine the light on something that I don't think a lot of us talk about. There is nothing pretty, there is nothing exciting, and I think for a lot of people, there's no end in sight. And when the end comes in sight, it's actually the loss of a loved one. Luckily, my mom is alive. She's getting stronger every day, but this has been a process. Caring for an aging parent is no small feat. It is not for the faint of heart. And can I just say that, even though every day is a gift, we're not guaranteed a very long life. I will say that I have definitely come to see some sort of dark places in my own energy, places and situations that I hadn't ever visited because I was never forced to visit, what it feels like to look at mortality straight in the face. Well, I have actually had one other incident, but anyway, we're not talking about that today. What we are talking about is Kristen's going to ask me a few questions based on, if you remember my very, very first Harmony TV series, it was basically my health journey. So I felt like it was important for women to understand where I come from. I truly believe in the spirit of just letting everyone know and to see where I come from, why I believe the way I do, and why I work the way I work. And in understanding my story and hearing my journey, hopefully you see how we're, in some small way as women, all connected, and our health there is no greater currency in this life than our health. We can't do a whole lot without it. And boy, if I didn't know that before 3 weeks ago, I certainly know that now. So welcome. And as always, thank you for the grace of this hiatus. I tried one other week to get up on here, and I have to be honest, I didn't have it in me. And what I really believed was I needed to preserve my energy to be very present for my mom. And I'm so glad I did. It's one of the greatest, this has been one of the greatest lessons of my life as an adult. So thank you.
Great. So I guess we're coming full circle, because the last time that we talked, we were talking about you being in the doctor's office with
Right.
your own health issues when you were diagnosed with thyroid disease. Correct.
Yes.
And the doctor was basically, I guess you'd been reading, and the doctor was basically telling you, nothing that you're telling me has any basis in any research or scientific data. And you were frustrated. And then what did you do from there? Because that's kind of where we ended.
That is where we ended. And I said, I'll leave the good stuff for part 2, right? So the interesting thing about where I ended, and so there's a parallel here, right? Like where I ended in my story and where my life sort of began. So I came to a real crossroads in my health. I came to a moment of real depth and darkness where I felt so alone, where I felt like, am I really crazy? Like, am I doing all these things and reading all these books? And is it really that I am doing the things that no one has, like, how can I be the one, right? And I'm not saying that that I discovered anything by any means, but you have to understand, this was close to 20 years ago, before the internet and before like doctors and pharmacists and coaches kind of hit the circuit and wrote, did lots of, there was no social media, there was no internet I don't think, if there was, it wasn't what it is, certainly wasn't what it is now. And certainly the professionalization of the medical sort of functional medicine coaching hadn't happened yet, right? So there were people talking about sort of the outliers of functional medicine and the outliers of what we call quote unquote alternative medicine, but they weren't necessarily in the forefront. And certainly even now it's not as mainstream. So what did I do? The first thing I did was I kept doing what I was doing, because what I was doing, which is I gave up gluten and dairy, and that made a tremendous difference in not only my thyroid, but also Hashimoto's. So Hashimoto's is the autoimmune component that came because the thyroid disease wasn't diagnosed in time. What happens when you're in that sort of on that trajectory is then your body goes into a full-blown autoimmune state, or at least that's what my body did. I suppose not everyone's body does it. If you catch thyroid disease early enough, thyroid complications and issues, you can actually reverse it. You can actually heal it, heal the complications of the body, so you don't move into autoimmune disease. Autoimmune disease comes when it's, a progression of these symptoms over time. And obviously there's a genetic component, but our genetics don't pull the trigger. Our genetics load the gun. And what we do in our daily life, this is, I don't remember who said this, probably Mark Hyman or one of those guys, but what we do on a daily basis all the time is what creates who we are, what creates our reality, what creates our life. So what I did was I gave up gluten. That was the biggest thing. And at first I did it sort of 87 to 90%, right? Like I would have it every once in a while. And at first when I did that, I felt great. And then I would sort of go out, or I'd be invited to someone's house, or we'd be at a restaurant, or we'd be on vacation. It wouldn't be convenient to be gluten-free. So I was conveniently gluten-free, not religiously gluten-free. So what I am now, and what I have been for probably 15 years, maybe a little longer, I don't know, we'll just call it 15 years. I've been religiously gluten-free. And every time I am exposed to gluten, it doesn't send me into a full autoimmune trigger, but I definitely feel it. And now I know what it feels like. And now I correlate what I feel like to what I did, like whether I ate something, whether I was at a restaurant or whatever, and I didn't know.
Now,
So
is the gluten specific to the autoimmune disorder? Is that something that you feel everyone should do? Is go
I
gluten
don't
free?
think, yeah, that's a great question. I don't think everybody needs to go gluten-free, although I will say, in caring for my mom and recognizing some of the precursor of what's brought her to the place now, and just so everyone knows, so it's not this elusive like white elephant sitting in the room. So my mom had a mini stroke. She had a TIA, and then and luckily there was no long-term neurological damage from that they could find. And then she went on to also have quite a large blood clot that started in her leg, moved up through her heart, and she's very lucky it stopped in her lungs, so which caused a pulmonary embolism. So she ended up falling, passing out, and breaking several ribs, and needed to go off certain medications and then be put on another medication. So there was an element of medication disharmony for her. So it's not that that particular medication is bad, and it's certainly not that all medication is bad. So I just want to be very clear that in my mom's case, and I know this 100%, that medication is part of what is definitely helping her heal, and certainly at one point keeping her alive. So This is a good thing. This is why we have medication, is when we absolutely 100% need it, when there's no other alternative, right? But what we want to do, and what she is definitely trying to do, is minimize the medications that she's on. And certainly if she's on them, she wants to be on the lowest dosage that her body possibly needs. So the question was, does everybody need to be gluten-free? I don't believe that everyone in the world needs to be gluten-free, but I will say this: gluten as we know it, wheat. So there's gluten in lots of different foods, right? But the specific gluten that is in wheat, and this, I could do an entire talk on, GMOs and wheat and herbicides and pesticides and all that. So obviously I think probably lots of people already know a lot of what I'm saying, but just for the sake of like the one person who's never heard it before. So wheat is a very high pesticide GMO crop. And so there's nothing in it that is helping the microbiome of the gut. And when we take on food in our gut that inherently has some component in it that kills it either prevents or it kills either the microbes or the bugs or the pests or whatever, that element not only over time kills the microbiome, kills some element of our microbiome, but it also weakens our energy force. So it's a very low vibrational food. And I talk about the vibration of food. I talk about the energy of food, not the vibration, but the energy of food in Feeding Over Feeding Over 40. I don't know why I just based on that name, but I talk about that a lot in Eat the Rainbow, which is the challenge I run before Feeding Over 40, and also in Feeding Over 40. And what I've done with my mom, and how this is so pertinent, is ironically, my mom was having some gut dysbiosis before she had the TIA. And when I came to see her, I realized, like, people of a certain age, it's very common. Women, post-menopause, gaining weight is very common. Weight gain around the middle is even more common with women post-menopausally. And here's where we get into the hormone component, right? Because we become more insulin sensitive as we get older, as we age. And women who don't truly understand gut health can turn to various things, and various foods that used to be okay are not actually as good for us now that we're postmenopausal as they were when we had all of our hormones working in some fashion or another. So what I've done is taken my mom off gluten, and the weight is literally falling off of her. Now, she's not an obese woman by any means, but she's definitely one of the side effects, or one of the complications, one of the symptoms of stroke and blood clots is when you have visceral fat. So when you have an excess of visceral tissue. I don't like to use the word fat because fat is a nutrient. Like, we actually need fat to survive. So I really think about it as like visceral adipose tissue. So she's particularly, she carries her weight particularly around the middle. And that's the most dangerous place for women, men also, but I'm really speaking about women's health. That's the most dangerous place to carry weight for both heart health and longevity. So what every doctor that we've seen, every neurologist, every hematologist, every cardiologist, and every primary care says, trying to lose weight is one of the greatest things you can do. So what did I do? I haven't limited her calories at all. In fact, she said to me the other day, which was so funny, she said, I'm eating more food now than I was before, and the weight's falling off me. She's like, I'm not hungry at all. And I said, isn't that interesting? Because when we learn to eat for our constitution and our stage of life, like right now, she needs nutrient dense food. So wheat flour, or white, bleached wheat flour, which is white flour, which constitutes, a massive amount of calories in the American diet. When you take that out, you actually have to replace it with something else. So it's not about just taking the wheat out. You have to then replace it. So this is something that I did for myself, and I'm doing for my mother. So here's the parallel, right? Once I decided to prioritize my food, prioritize my health, when you take out the bread, the wheat, the pasta, the rice, the grains. So there's lots of different grains. And I do eat a couple of grains, but I eat them sparingly. I do sometimes still have rice, but I do it sparingly. And I think of it as like a treat, right? So I think of rice I think of a curry or Indian food or something like that. So it's a treat. And when I have it, I have a very small portion because otherwise I don't feel great. And my whole existence is that I spent so long in my life not feeling good that now that I know what feeling good feels like, I prioritize that over everything, because when I feel good, I do incredible things. When I feel good, I'm a better wife. When I feel good, I'm a more present parent. When I feel good in my body, I can be there and tap into a level of awareness and energetic expansion with my clients, with my life, with my friends, with my family that I couldn't before. I could barely function. So it's one of those things that's been very interesting watching my mom go through this process. It's very easy for her to give up wheat. She didn't think it would be this easy, and nor did I. And when I gave it up, I didn't have someone cooking all my meals and like figuring it all out for me. So it was a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of learning on my own. But what I found was when I replaced those calories of rice and pasta and bread with nutrient dense foods, so foods that either walked on land, swam in the ocean, grew from the earth, or fell off trees and bushes. When I replaced food in one of those four categories, I watched my health change. Not only did I watch my health change, I watched my skin change. I watched my body composition change. And I mean, I'm not someone who's ever really like, I have a lot of issues, but weight isn't one of them, right? So like it's just not ever something I've given very much thought to. I mean, do I wish certain elements of my body looked a little bit different? I mean, at one point I really cared about that. I don't so much anymore. I'm very happy with my body. I'm very happy with how it functions and what it looks like. But letting go of wheat, letting go meaning choosing not to eat it, not telling myself I can't eat it, but telling myself I don't want to eat it. I prioritize what I feel, how I feel, and adding in lots of different colors on my plate literally shifted my health and shifted my body. It shifted how my body functioned. And I'm watching the same thing happen with my mom. And the interesting thing is we went to the cardiologist, and we have, she's been having her heart monitored in different capacities over the past 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And the really beautiful thing is actually being able to track with cutting edge science, whether it's an echo or we take her blood pressure twice a day. So she actually can see what a dehydrated state does to her blood pressure versus a hydrated versus a dehydrated state. And dehydrated meaning like she hasn't had a glass of water in 2 hours. Like that actually creates a dehydrated state in her body. And she can see that through blood pressure. Her blood pressure changes instantly with one glass of water. I mean, it's just shocking. Like when you have all this technology and you're actually tracking all this data, it's not small bits of, science is just a whole bunch of facts, right? And these facts are what we create. We ask the questions, and then we answer the questions, and then we create science, right? But like the facts are nothing. It's like a house, right? Like I think about a house being made of stone or bricks. It's only a house because you've taken the bricks and you created a house, but a pile of bricks is not a house. And a bunch of facts and science doesn't make something real. It's real because it works. It's real because you understand it. It's real because you put it into practice, or someone's put it into practice and is telling you this is real. But it's not real just because someone hasn't done a test on it, or because someone hasn't seen it the way you see it. If it actually changes the way you feel, then it is science, because you've asked the question and you've asked the hypothesis, you created the hypothesis, and then you've created I can't remember the scientific method. Help me out, Kristen. Kristen's a genius.
No.
Your question.
Testing your hypothesis.
Yeah,
So you
testing
have
your
hypothesis,
right.
which is your question, and then you're gonna have your experiment, or
Yeah.
your
And then you
test.
experiment, right? And then you see what your results are based on your hypothesis and then what you've experimented. Thank you. You said it so beautifully. So, and that's how I feel like with food, it's so profound and yet so very simple. It's so simple. It's so simple. Anybody can do this. Anybody who takes food and puts it down their throat can actually do this. It doesn't need to be, and of course there's different levels and layers, right? Like a person who exercises for 10 or 12 hours a week is a very different person who exercises for 2 hours a week. But 0 to 2 hours a week is still more than nothing, versus a person who exercises like 8, 9, or 10 or 12 hours a week. Getting from 0 to 1 is huge, much bigger than getting from 11 to 12 hours. Like if you're exercising 11 hours a week, exercising another hour a week is nothing. It really doesn't shift a lot of things in the same way that 0 to 1 hour, 0 to 2 hours will shift massively. So what is my point to this? My point is that through my own health journey and through my mom's rehabilitation, seemingly small, inconsequential, couldn't be very important elements literally shift physiology massively. And that's what I'm watching. And I know this intellectually. That's the thing. It's like I went through this with myself, and I go through this with my clients, but now I'm doing it again on a very different level, where I'm like in awe of what my mom is doing, and in awe of the data that we're collecting, because I don't usually have access to this kind of machines, and literally watching her heart heal. Like, oh, this was the point of the story. The cardiologist said her heart is already starting to heal. Isn't this amazing? And that's just not something that cardiologist says very often. You know what I mean? Like when you're in the room with a neurologist, or you're in the room with like when you're in the room with people who are dealing with like the major body parts of the body, you don't get the like woo side of like, isn't this amazing? Like that's just not things that they say. So I have to hold on to that. We have to believe that we have the power to shift our bodies, shift our reality, shift our thoughts in profound ways.
Well, and I think the thing is like empowering yourself. I
Yeah.
think that's really important. And I think that's what you did in that doctor's office. Was like you said, okay, he said, this isn't real. And you're like, well, let me see. And you empowered yourself to be the one that was figuring out what was best for your body.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. Because the stuff he was feeding me wasn't really working. It wasn't working, and I wasn't feeling the way he said I was feeling. And so it was actually she the first time. And so when I did that, and also I just love it when people tell me no. Like people told me no all my life. Oh, you can't do that. Oh, your scores aren't good enough to do that. And I'm like, really? Watch me. Like, just watch me. But that's my nature. That's my personality. And I recognize everyone is not like me. Everyone is not the kind of person who can question a doctor's, or even not, I wasn't even questioning him. I was just saying, I've tried this thing, and isn't this amazing? What do you think? And they're like, no. And I'm kind of like, really? Can we not even entertain this? Because like, I'm a human being. Like, I'm real. I'm legit. I'm sitting in your office and I'm telling you this is shifting. And I've been doing your protocol for months now, and I don't really feel a shift. So I think this is just one element of, and I'm not here to talk about COVID or the jab or any of that, because like I said in a live I did on my personal profile recently, I think body autonomy is massive. I think it's massive, and I believe everybody has the choice. Everyone should have the choice to decide what works for them and what works for their family, their body, their health, their life, right? But in this time that we're living in, we have to see what is happening, and we really need to go back to the roots, go back to the place of, does this work? Does this sound like it will work for me? Is this right for me? And what is my body telling me right now? Like, it was a full body yes when I was like, no, I'm going to keep trying this. This is working for me, and I'm going to keep doing it. Whether you validate it, you doctor with all of your, degrees and knowledge, I'm going to do this with or without your consent. And because it couldn't hurt me. It can't hurt you to eat more fruits and vegetables and to nourish yourself on a really profound level. It can't hurt you. And I just want to say one more thing to that before you ask me another question is, I now look at the condition of my doctors. I look at what they look like. And I don't mean, are they attractive, not attractive? I mean, I really couldn't care. I look at the whites of their eyes. I look at their skin. I look at how they interact with me. Do they make eye contact with me? Do they really hear what I'm saying? Do they cut off my sentences? Like, do they look healthy? Do they look like someone who gets up and moves in between patients during the day? Do they look like someone who spends time with their family? Do they look like someone who's loved, like truly deeply loved? Because that kind of person doesn't have a giant bowling ball in the front of belly. That kind of person isn't carrying 100 pounds, 50, 70, 100 pounds of extra weight. That kind of person values health for themselves as much as they're trying to help other people heal. And I think that's something I talk to my clients about all the time, is like, when they have a doctor and they're having a particular diagnosis or situation or trying to manage symptoms, I say to myself, do you trust this person? Like, when you look at them, do they feel like someone who has your best interests at heart? Your best interest at heart? Do they look like someone who values health? And if the answer to that question is no, then you really have to wonder, like, do they actually know what's best for you? Like, is the information they're giving you really helpful to you? Or is it just something they've always done because that's what they've always done, and they're not keeping up with current science and what's happening in the world? So I just wanted to throw that out there because I think it's something that women don't think about. Like, is my doctor actually healthy? Like, does my doctor look healthy, you know?
So I have to ask you this question because we've been teasing it for 3 weeks. We have to ask you, what is the most powerful medicine on the planet? And we'll need you to explain why.
Well, there's loads of them, but the most obvious one at hand is food. So food is the most powerful, potent medicine on the planet. And you said, what is it and why? So the first element is because we eat food multiple times a day. Generally, the majority of people eat food in a quantity, multiple times a day, every day, most every day for their entire lives. So if you think about a habit, so up there with that is sleeping, right? We sleep in theory, we should be sleeping every single night of our lives. So these things that we do often and for long durations or in quantity, those elements are things that we really have to. Here's the storm. Did you hear
I
that?
told you it was coming.
Yeah, it's here. I just heard like massive thunder to the side. It like
It makes
frightened
sense
me.
because we're close now and it hit
Yeah,
me
we
here.
are. I know, it's so weird. And there's right now, oh, I see the clouds are back that way. So in understanding like how to shift the needle in the greatest, most profound way, like what you eat. So it's three things. It's what you eat, it's how you combine it, and is it right for your constitution and stage of life? So, obviously I have a digital program on this, and I do, Feeding Over 40 usually twice a year, sometimes 3 times a year. And I teach these principles in here, but the main thing I'll say is that what you eat, so every single thing we put in our mouth, we chew up and we swallow, or we put in our mouth and we drink and we swallow, it literally becomes us. So our liver, all the cells in our liver becomes a different liver, like every 7 to 8 years. So it's not that your actual liver is like a different liver and it dissolves and grows a new one. It's that you're literally rebuilding your body every single day of your life. So you get to choose, you get to have a choice. Are you eating packaged processed food that has chemicals and preservatives and flavorings and colors that are not natural, that they don't grow in the earth, they don't walk the land, they don't swim in the ocean or grow from a tree or a bush? I usually say fall from a tree or a bush. So those chemicals, those chemical food-like substance, right? If you put all that stuff together, and there's usually where there's one, there's 20. Usually healthy food doesn't just have like one chemical added to it. So it's kind of an either or. It's like it's either as close to its natural state as possible with very little seasoning and flavoring, and you just eat it the way it is, or it's packaged, it's preserved, it's flavor enhanced, it's chemically enhanced, or it's genetically modified, which is a whole other conversation in and of itself. And that becomes you. So do we as a civilization, do we actually want to be walking around and our bodies are made of chemicals and preservatives and colorings? Because what we eat actually becomes us. It's broken down, digested in those nutrients or anti-nutrients are what our body uses to grow new cells, to grow new tissue. And that becomes our consciousness. Do you know what I mean? So if you, it's like, for example, have you ever walked into a room? This is how I think of it, like fragrance. This is a really good example. So when I first came to my mom's house, she likes to buy those, she likes everything to smell. Okay. Now, this is one of the other things. So anybody who has autoimmune disease, like this is one of the other things I did that really moved the needle. So it's like a parallel here. So one of the things I did was I got rid of all the as much toxic load to my body as I minimize the toxic load as much as possible. And the most important thing is food, and the next most important thing is your toxicity levels, which is a huge contributor also to chronic disease like cancer, autoimmune, inflammatory conditions like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, things like that.
And
So
you're talking about like cleaning stuff, beauty supplies, things like that?
everything. I'm
Yeah.
talking about fragrance. Yeah. So everything you put on your skin, everything you clean your house with, everything you use. So, like, do you drink your water in a plastic water bottle or in a plastic tumbler, or do you put it in a glass or a stainless steel water bottle? So it's like everything, right? Your laundry detergent, what you clean your house with, what your food comes in, how you store your food, the way you cook your food, because we also cook food, and the way you cook your food and what you cook your food in can be very toxic or it can be minimal, right? So it's all those things. One of the things my mom does is she likes everything to smell good. She buys those Glade. I don't want to get in trouble with any kind of companies or anything, but she buys those things that you plug into the wall and they heat up and they emit these smells into the air. And they take my breath away. They're asphyxiating to me. They make me hold my breath because I don't want to smell it. They burn the inside of my nostrils, not to the point where I'm like, oh, I'm burning, but it burns. There's like a slight burning sensation. So when I come, I sound like a freak. When I come, she usually unplugs all those and puts them away because, well, for one, she doesn't want to listen to me complain about it. But for two, like she recognizes and she knows, and she's very, my mom's amazingly kind and sweet and wants everyone to, she tries to make everybody feel really good all the time, right? So I said to her, I was like, okay, Mom, uh, you got to get rid of these because this is fragrance and this is endocrine disruptors and this is all things, this is troublesome to the body. So we started getting rid of them. And Kristen, what was the point of the story? Do you remember? What did you ask me?
Well, I was asking about food and being the most
And
powerful
somehow I got
medicine,
on.
but that's okay because this is good because we were talking. The whole thing is around what did you do to
Right.
kind of change your story, basically.
Cool.
So
Okay,
you're
good.
right on track.
But there was something about the smells and using these Glade things. Anyway, there was a point to all this, and I can't remember what it is. But the biggest point is that
I know what it was. Sorry.
yeah, good.
You were talking about how, what we eat becomes us, and that works, from a good standpoint and a bad standpoint, and then you were gonna use fragrance as an example.
Right. So when it comes to fragrance, we can use fragrance. So this is an example. So we can use natural fragrance. And what is natural fragrance? When you cut flowers. So my mom loves lilies. So anytime there's a situation or a birthday or whatever, I buy her a giant thing of lilies because I know not only is the visual, so this is the energy of the flowers, changes her vibration, but also the smell of the lilies changes her vibration as well. So when you have a natural fragrance versus a natural smell versus a synthetic fragrance, it changes your vibration. It changes the way your body then doesn't. So the lilies, the body doesn't have to take the smell of the lilies and alter it in your liver and separate it and then excrete it. There's nothing. It has an energetic exchange with the lilies. And I recognize it can sound a little foreign to some people, but there's a true connection to the cut flowers in a way that these plug-in fragrancy things, there's no connection to that. In fact, it's repelling to the body. The body doesn't actually crave it. The body repels it. And then the body, not only that, but you start having that smell in your body all the time. So my mom lives in her house. She sleeps here. She lives here. She eats here. So that smell is always penetrating her. over time, that accumulation of those toxins, the body has to get rid of that. So that on top of other toxins, and that's a known toxin that you can see that you can do something about. And there are so many toxins in the air, in the water, in, off-gassing of furniture and things like that. Like, there's a lot of things we don't have a lot of control over, but the ones we do, really shifting that is immensely important. And that's one of the first things we did, was we started shifting and changing the things that we had the ultimate control over. Not to mention using your dollars to spend your money in a way, because the industry of, fragrance, the industry of food, the industry of recreation, the food industry, and the like personal care, they listen to how you spend your dollars. Your dollars mean something. And the more women, because traditionally women buy for the entire family and sometimes extended family. So the more women make these choices, the more we will literally change the industry. So I just wanted that. That's a really important thing. But of course, food's the most important thing. The food is absolutely the most important thing. And just to reiterate, like, everything we eat becomes us. So if you recognize, so like when you go and to eat your dinner tonight, this is the last thing I'll say about food, because I want you to ask me more questions, is it takes just as long to go get in your car and drive somewhere and pick up something, whether it's takeout or fast food or food from a restaurant, and then bring it home. It takes just as long, whether you're waiting for the food to show up or you're going to get the food and bring it home. It takes just as much time. So it's not even a resource of time before you can eat that food. It's actually just making a choice of health over convenience. Because I think as a culture, we prioritize convenience over prioritizing things that will help us, make us better, stronger, more empowered people.
So this is probably going to sound like a very basic question, but what does all this have to do with your hormones?
That is an amazing question. So our hormones are messages, right? They're messages from our brain that go on to dictate, regulate, dysregulate various organs, systems, and glands, right? So our hormones actually regulate or dysregulate everything. So, for example, let's go back to the fragrance. So plastics, the food that has been sitting in plastic or heated up in plastic, that's even worse. So something that comes in plastic versus something heated in plastic versus something that is not in plastic is huge, because the body has to expel that. So plastic is made from chemicals that, when ingested into the body, mimic estrogen. So a very common side effect of any woman, but certainly women in perimenopause, so that's like 40 to 50, is either an excess of estrogen or estrogen dominance. As we age, the estrogen starts to go down. You want very few estrogen mimicking compounds in your body. So a lot of these fragrance and plastics and things, we have receptors in our body, and those receptors pick up these synthetic or xenoestrogens, as they're called. It picks that up, and then on top of that, your body's making estrogen, and that's a massive contributor to estrogen dominance. And estrogen dominance can cause a lot of adverse symptoms, as women like to call it. Like, I'm having this symptom, and they go to their doctor, and their doctor doesn't ask them particularly, do you drink all of your liquids in plastic? Are you cooking in Teflon skillets? Are you buying food that's packaged in plastic? Are you buying food that's wrapped in plastic wrap? Are you wearing lots of synthetic clothing? Are you filtering your water? All of these things have xenoestrogens in them. And when we ingest them, not only do we put pressure on our liver, and our liver is one of the, it's our major detoxifier. It has massive
Filtration.
Huge filtration, right? And it also houses a lot of emotion. So we don't want to tax our liver, because our liver is quite literally a massive part of how we view and see the world. Not only that, but also, as you say, filtration. Yeah.
So why is it so important at this time of life, that 40 to 50? Not that it's not important in other times of our life, but why is it so important at this time of your life that you're focusing on these kind of things?
Sure. So with estrogen, we don't want an excess of estrogen. When we have an excess of estrogen at this stage of life, our progesterone is starting to decline while our estrogen is either maybe teetering in the mid-range, sometimes high, sometimes low, but our progesterone is typically lowering. And this is part of the transition from perimenopause to menopause. When you don't have progesterone balancing estrogen, they're like a seesaw. When your progesterone is continually going down, 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 because your ovaries are quieting, right? You're not releasing an egg, and the release of the egg is the follicle, and the follicle is part of the creation and release of progesterone. We don't have that progesterone. We don't have anything balancing the estrogen. And we've all heard of estrogen dominant cancers of the breast, of the reproductive organs. So we want to try to minimize that as much as possible. The xenoestrogens, the synthetic estrogens, which are also in birth control, which are also in hormone replacement therapy that isn't bioidentical. So these are all aspects where we want to try to have a harmony of what's happening in our body because our hormones are actually shifting and changing all the time.
Great.
Yeah, that's a
Well,
good
we're
question.
we're at about 40 minutes. I don't know if you want to go longer today or if you want to.
Do you have one more question? I feel like there's one more question in the health journey. Should I maybe finish off? Let's finish off. I'll just finish off of like how I got to where I am now. And then I feel like we've
Yes,
completed
I think
the
that's
health
very important.
the health journey, right?
Yes. So how did you
So,
get here and how did you start wanting to help others? I think that's
yeah.
also important.
Yeah, exactly. Totally. So the interesting thing was, so around 34, I wanted to get pregnant. It took us almost a year to get pregnant. I was still having some thyroid stuff. We're still working on my thyroid levels, and thyroid is a huge component it's one of the, not the, but one of the big components on getting pregnant and maintaining the pregnancy, right? So I had to get that in order. And I did that through acupuncture and food and meditation and changing my life. Like, I basically stopped working as hard as I was working. I was a designer at that point. As I've said many times, I used to be a costume designer. I did some set design on the side as well. And I taught at a major university in New York. So I just sort of started to quiet things down in order to be able to ramp up listening to my body so I could start to get ready to carry a child, right? So my late 30s, so like 35 to 40, was basically me getting pregnant twice and carrying those babies and raising those babies to the point where I felt like I could, get help after that, childcare help. And then it took probably a year or two, if we're being honest. Like, it took me about 2 years. I had been applying for some teaching positions. I had been applying for a couple of different. I was sort of like revisiting what I was thinking I would do, and even though I got a lot of people telling me I'm overqualified, and they weren't even interviewing me for jobs that I could have done quite easily. I was very qualified, both educationally and with experience. And I knew I didn't want to go back to design the way I had, because I really enjoyed being around, and I didn't want to work the hours or do the traveling that I was doing when I was a theater designer. So when I couldn't get a job, when I couldn't get anyone to interview me, which is kind of hard to say out into the real world, but I now see that this is, it was all conspiring in my favor. Both my husband, a good friend of mine, and my acupuncturist at the time were like, "You're so into health and you know so much. Why don't you start a blog? Or why don't you because at that point everyone was blogging. So we're talking like 12 years ago, I guess, 10 or 12 years ago. And I was like, I hate to write. That's my problem. Is I don't really, I don't like to write. So I don't want that to be my thing. As Kristen can attribute to, Michelle does not like to write. So, so I said, I'm not sure about that. But my acupuncturist had this great idea. So she had this client who was very sick. and had a lot of health issues. So she was treating this client privately in his home. And she said, he's looking for someone to design his meal plan. I feel like if he would eat better, he could get better and it would change his health drastically. And you are the perfect person with your personality and just the way that you see health. And I was like, okay, sure, I'll try it. So I tried it, and for a year I created, or it was like a little more than a year, like a year and a half. I was like, great, this is my business. I'm going to do this. And I went full in. And basically I became what I called like a medicinal chef, right? So I designed the menus, and I was getting to the point where I was starting to hire people to go into these people's homes and cook for them. So I started out doing it, and then I was hiring people to do it with me. And it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't really like this. This isn't really satisfying to me. I mean, I liked doing it, but it wasn't the kind of thing where I was excited every day to get up and I was excited to leave my kids in order to do the work. So for me in my life, if what I'm doing isn't more exciting, this sounds a bit weird. I don't know. It's coming out sounding a bit weird, but like if I don't want to go to work and I'd rather be with my kids, that means that whatever I'm doing isn't really the right thing. That's my barometer, right? And it's not that I ever really want to leave my kids, but it's good for all of us to have a little space from each other at times. Yeah. So just so we're all clear about that, like I freaking love my kids, and I'm missing them right now tremendously. But the point is I pivoted my business. What I was loving in that medicinal chef business was talking to the people in their homes and talking to them about how they felt about health, how they felt about their life, what about the food was working, not working, that kind of thing. And so I sort of got the idea that I was going to do this kind of like counseling. Like I didn't know what it was called, but I was like, I'm going to create a business around this. And that's when the coaching industry was kind of getting off the ground, I guess. I don't know, maybe it had been around forever, but I had just sort of figured it out. And then I started doing coaching around food. So I moved away from doing it for people, and I wanted to empower women to do it for themselves. Because when women figure it out and do it for themselves, it's a longer lasting change. It's a sustainable, empowered place versus just tell me what to do so I can do it. And I'll do that for a short amount of time, but I can't do that forever, because then it's a dependent relationship. And what I'm trying to do with all of my clients is make it, and it's what they want anyway, is to really empower women to figure out what works for them so that they can move forward and really have this incredible place where they're changing their body and changing their lives. And from there, then when I was like in my early 40s, so this is the hormone component. So I went from like truly doing like food coaching to moving into hormones and aging. And that kind of came about with my own exploration around biohacking. So integrative biohacking, and that's again, tracking the data, testing my hormones, learning, going to symposiums and classes and taking programs and things like that. So I can understand and truly help women through this stage of life as naturally as possible, because I think the body responds to the natural world in a really profound way. It doesn't shift our energy. It's kind of like eating chemicals. It's like the lens by which we see the world is something expansive and magnetic versus something chemically induced. So, which is not to say that some women don't need medications, but I try to get women to such an amazing place that if they need something, they need just the smallest amount of it. So that's how I got in. And then, so it went from like medicinal chef into food coaching into hormones, which obviously is all of those elements put together. So the food is naturally in there as well. And here we are,
We are.
49 and going strong.
Great.
Kristen, you're
Yes.
amazing. I love you. You ask the
Oh, me
best
too.
questions.
Good.
And ladies, Harmony TV, I love this. I love everybody jumping on and being here and listening. And I'm going to say this because I think this is really important. I'm coming up with these ideas. Kristen and I are brainstorming all the time, but I want to answer your questions. I want to hear the topics that you're passionate about. I want you to reach out. You can send me an email. You can comment below. We're always compiling information. You can DM me. I usually get mostly DMs because most people don't want to say things out loud in front of other people. So keep the DMs coming because I love hearing the topics that people want to know about. Our next Harmony TV is going to be next week. So I'm super excited. And as always, thank you. I value your presence. I value connection. And the purpose of this is to explode the conversation around midlife, aging, and all things health for women. Thanks a lot.